unfortunately, I have to use two sets of glasses. One is for reading close, and the other is for reading at a slight distance. So if I keep changing my glasses, don't worry, it's just that I have to do it because I can't then see close or I can't see too far. So shall we make a start? Shall we make a start? Let's make a start. All right, well, welcome everybody, welcome. My name is Charles Blair. I'd like to, just before we start the presentation, just tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about my story, how I came to be here and what is my connection with the tourism and travel industry. I was born, grew up, educated in the UK, and then later went to live in Australia and became an Australian citizen. But in the UK, when I left school, I studied law. I studied law, not because I wanted to, it's because I got pushed into it by my parents. And because of that, I didn't try very hard at it, I have to admit. So then I left that, and then got various jobs in different places, and by chance I got a job at Manchester Airport. I come from Manchester, that's my city. Yes, I support Manchester United. But at Manchester Airport, I live very close to it, and there were a lot of jobs going, especially during the summer months, when it was the busiest time. They needed a lot of casual staff there to help prepare the meals that go on the planes. So that's what I did. I got a job there with flight catering, helping to put the meals, prepare the meals that go on the planes and the trays. Now these were not, was not like really first-class food or anything like that. It was more like snacks because it was for very short flights. People going from UK to Spain for a holiday, for example. But I really enjoyed that job. And I used to work nights. I used to work overtime. I just loved it. I couldn't be there long enough. And eventually I got talking to the management there, and it was owned then by British Airways and Fortes. Everyone heard of Fortes? Charles Forte, hotelier in the UK. It was owned, it was a joint venture with British Airways and Fortes. And I was talking to the management there about career paths, career potential in their company. So the managers there, they advised me, they said, you really need to go back to college. Go back to college, study tourism and hospitality, get a degree in it, and then come back into the company. You'll be, in terms of your career, prospects will be enhanced by that. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, thank you for telling me. Yeah, so the company advised me to go back to college to get a degree in, then it was called catering, hotel and catering management. They didn't use the term hospitality. This was back in 1971, 72. So this is what I did. I went back to school, went back to college. I did a 3-year degree program. At that time, it was just the first degree you could do at that level in hospitality or tourism or catering. Up till that time, all you could do was a trade type of course. You could just do a, say to be a chef or a sous chef or a waiter or a waitress, or to be a receptionist, or to be working ticketing in a travel agent, for example. You couldn't do anything higher level in terms of your qualifications. This was the very first one. This was the beginning of it. This was the beginning of tourism education as we have it today. So that's what I did. I went back, I did a 3-year degree program, and qualified after that. I worked in hotels for a short time for different hotel companies, and then I always wanted to open my own business. So I got involved in my own business. It was a distribution business. It was a food and beverage distribution business, supplying mainly hotels and restaurants. And then that was very successful for a time, but then came a recession. Then came a downturn in the economy, one of many downturns in the cyclical downturn in the economy, and the business went down as a result of it. And that's when I decided to look elsewhere, and I went to live in Australia. And in Australia, I had to have a career change. I retrained as a teacher or educator. I had to do a graduate diploma in education. And then I worked in what was called the TAFE system, Technical and Further Education System, in Perth in Western Australia, as a lecturer in hospitality management. I worked there for a number of years, and then I was offered a promotion in Canberra, which is the national or federal capital of Australia. I was there as the head of Department of Hospitality and Business Management. So I worked there for a number of years, and from there I then went to the state of Tasmania, also in Australia. By this time I had become an Australian citizen, so that's how I had come to have 2 passports. And then I worked more in terms of enterprise development. At that time there was a big movement by the state and federal government to create more new business startups and to help businesses grow, businesses of all sectors, not just the tourism and hospitality business. So then we launched what was called the Tasmanian Centre for the Development of Entrepreneurs. Stayed there for a number of years, and then purely by chance, I was offered a short-term project in a tiny island group that you've probably never heard of. I never heard of it before, in the Pacific, called Palau, very famous for diving. People who are into diving, I'm not a diver, but they know about it. The Republic of Palau is near Guam and the Philippines. I worked there, worked with the College of Micronesia, doing some curriculum development, doing some training, writing training manuals for their tourism and hospitality courses, but on a short-term basis. And then I went back to my base in Tasmania, and then they offered me another project. They said, that was very successful, you did a good job there in Palau. Here's another project for you in Tonga, in the South Pacific. And in Tonga, I was working with the industry. I was working directly with industry, doing training in hotels and restaurants to help the workforce upgrade their skills. And from that, after that, the last 25 years, I've worked in more than 35 countries, mostly as an advisor or a consultant, working mainly with governments in Africa, in Asia, in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, in Eastern Europe, in the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean, on different aspects of tourism development. So I was fascinated by tourism and travel from a very early age, almost from birth. I was fascinated, I was captivated by the movement, not just the getting to a destination, because I was just a baby. My parents used to take me over. My mother is Irish. She used to take me to see my grandparents on the boat from England. And I used to just be fascinated by it. I loved it, even when I was just a few months old. I just loved the movement of traveling by boat, not by plane in those days, it wasn't much plane travel, but by boat and by train especially. Driving I don't like. I'm not very keen on driving. But I love traveling, just movement. So I always had this in my blood almost. So to me, it was almost a natural progression to go into the travel. I always wanted to travel. Then I started getting paid to travel, and I thought, this is the best world of all. I'm getting paid to do something I love doing, something I would do anyway. So I approached the travel industry from various perspectives. As an educator and trainer, I approach it from being in a business myself, as a businessman, and I approach it from being someone involved in tourism enterprise development. And that's going to be the theme of my talk today, enterprise development within the tourism sector. How to go about it, how to really the focus, and I'm basing it on a case study I'm working currently in East Africa, in a country called Uganda. Anyone been to Uganda or East Africa? Anyone been to Kenya or Tanzania? You have? You've been to Kenya, okay. So Uganda is just the next neighboring country. But unlike Kenya, it has no coastline. Beautiful country, fantastic country, great people. I'll tell you a bit more about it. But I'm basing this talk on loosely on the case study, on the project I'm actually working on right now in Uganda. So that's a little bit about my background and my story. We had a very interesting discussion yesterday. I don't know if anybody was there at the panel discussion last night in the Orange Room. Was anybody there? Anybody there last night? No? So you don't know what was discussed. A lot of the discussion was based around SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and the difficulties they have in starting up and growing. And much of the discussion focused on finance and access to finance, or the difficulties in accessing finance for business startups and growth. Now, this is a universal issue. This is not something that happens just in Saudi Arabia. Everywhere I go, and I said I've worked in more than 35 countries in enterprise development, this comes up as perhaps the number one issue, the number one obstacle. Then the discussion went on to how can we solve this issue? What solutions can we find to help the situation improve? Some people were suggesting at the panel, perhaps some government intervention would be the solution. And somebody mentioned, I think there was a particular program here, basically it was a loan guarantee scheme. It's a program whereby the government agrees to underwrite, because banks see SMEs, and particularly tourism SMEs, as a high-risk category. And therefore, if it's high risk, they don't want to lend to you unless it's based on collateral lending. So this makes starting a business very difficult, makes growing a business very difficult without this access to capital. So this loan guarantee scheme is a way the government can intervene to help reduce the risk of the banks, so the banks become more willing to lend to SMEs. Another suggestion was that perhaps create a sectoral bank. Create a bank as they have in Malaysia, for example. Malaysia has a very good system. It has a, what do they call it? A special tourism fund, which is accessible just for the indigenous Malays, just for people in the tourism sector to either start a business or help them grow their businesses, you know, to lend them money, lend them finance. That was another suggestion. I mean, all these things are good, all these interventions are good, but to be honest with you, they're not sustainable. Whenever you intervene in a marketplace to distort the market, it is not sustainable. It gives you a short-term benefit, and it can help, yes, in the short term, but it's not really sustainable. There's one young man, I saw him earlier, I have to put my glasses, sorry. Mr. Fares Al-Salama, am I pronouncing it correctly? He asked a question after the panel discussion, and he said, it's not just about money. He said, what about other forms of support, other forms of advice? And he's absolutely right. And that's really, as a result of that, he's inspired me to make some modifications to my presentation. So I saw him earlier. He was here about 15 minutes ago. He said he would come back, but maybe he's gone to another session. So I'd just like to thank him for his contribution. It was very, very useful. So another approach, and this is the approach that I would advocate in terms of government intervention to help solve this problem or this universal situation about the banks being reluctant to lend to small entrepreneurs. Let's make them better entrepreneurs. Let's make them better businessmen and women. Let's improve their skills. Let's improve their business management and their financial management skills. Let's increase their capacities as entrepreneurs. And that's really to make them, in other words, better clients for the banks, so that they go to the banks better prepared. They go with a proper business plan. The banks will then take them more seriously. The banks will perceive them as being less risk than someone just with a few ideas on the back of a piece of paper. It really helps to reassure the bank. So that's my real theme today, is making entrepreneurs, and I'm talking mainly about existing tourism entrepreneurs rather than perhaps creating more new ones, which is a different, related, but a different process. How to improve their capacities as tourism entrepreneurs. So that's the theme, and I'm basing it loosely on my current project in Uganda. So I'll be making several references to that. So if we just have a look in a little bit more detail at this particular project. My role in this project, and the title of the project is a little bit off-putting, but that's what we have been given. It's the support for the development of inclusive markets in tourism. It's a UNDP-funded program, United Nations Development Program, and they dream up these titles. Not particularly what I would call user-friendly, but that's what it's called. My role in this project is as the business development specialist. At the moment, we have a team of three international experts there. One is Spanish, the team leader. myself, and we have a lady from Finland who is the marketing specialist. We have very specific targets to reach by the end of this year. They have given us targets, given us objectives. The first one is to build the capacity of tourism SMEs, of 100 tourism SMEs. And also, added to that, they've included 6 tourism-related associations. So I'm sure, like you have here, they have an association for the travel agents, an association for the hotel owners, association for other activities. I'm sure you have a very similar institutional arrangement here too. I'm actually not involved on that side of it. I'm involved directly with the capacity building of the 100 tourism SMEs. With relation to these 100 tourism SMEs, we are also required to establish 30 business linkages with them or for them. I help them initiate 30 business linkages. Now, what does a business linkage mean? I think it's open to interpretation. It's helping them expand their markets, helping them get new suppliers, helping them, say, for example, I'm very keen that tour operators in our target areas in Uganda, I'm very keen that they should look at the Gulf market, because it's from say, Dubai directly, or Qatar, Doha, for example, it's only 5 hours flying time directly with Emirates or Qatar Airways to Entebbe. There's one international airport in Uganda on Lake Victoria, that's Entebbe. So what we will do is help them support them in developing linkages, say with outbound tour operators in Dubai, for example, link them with tour operators in our target areas, link them with hotels in our target areas. That's creating business linkages. So our target is to create a minimum of 30 business linkages. And finally, we also have to, or I have to, develop what they call 6 innovative business models. Now, it sounds a little bit academic, a little bit complicated. What they're looking for is new ways of doing business. They want to see these 100 SMEs, tourism SMEs, the entrepreneurs, perhaps looking at doing a business in a different sort of a way. So I've been going around the country, I've identified a number of tourism businesses and tourism enterprises, some of them are social enterprises also, that are doing something interesting, doing something innovative. It could be, for example, say a company has a profit-sharing scheme for its employees. That's a business model. So that's something that can be transferred to other businesses. Other businesses can learn and adopt and adapt that if they want to. But I have to develop 6 of these innovative business processes. So those are the targets. As I said, it's funded by the United Nations Development Programme and implemented by the Uganda Tourism Board. But the technical assistance to help them implement it, they are supported through the UN World Tourism Organization. So I and my other colleagues, we are contracted by the UN World Tourism Organization in Madrid to support the Uganda Tourism Board in implementing this project. It's not a national project, it has a geographic focus. It's focused on 3 areas, 3 very specific geographic regions of Uganda. I'll show you a map, perhaps explains that a little bit better. The east, the west, and the southwest. We didn't choose those areas, they were already given to us. That was decided already by the UNDP based on various criteria, such as what is there of interest for tourists. It was also based on the poverty map. A lot of this project is underpinned by poverty alleviation. It's to increase the participation of the local communities so that people get a better share of the tourist dollar, shall we say. Rather than tourism just passing by in a Land Rover and they wave to the tourist, actually get some benefit from it, get some economic benefit so that household incomes rise. So pro-poor actually underpins the whole of this project. Its objectives are to improve and diversify the tourism product mix in these 3 areas. Uganda does have quite a strong tourism industry already, but it needs to strengthen its offering. It needs to diversify its product base. It's very much focused on the wildlife product. They have about 11 national parks with fantastic wildlife resources. All the major, what they call the big five or the big six. You know, the elephants, the giraffe, the hippopotamus, the lion, etc. But this isn't enough. And other countries are competing within that market. Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Botswana. It's not enough just to be doing the same thing all the time, relying on the wildlife resource. So diversifying and strengthening the product mix is one of the essential elements of this project. Also in these target areas, we want to increase the yield of tourism. In other words, this was something my colleague in the orange room was talking about earlier, increasing the yield. Not just about increasing numbers, that's one thing, the volume of tourists. That doesn't automatically mean that you'll increase the economic benefits derived from tourism. You need to increase what we call increase the yield. So if each tourist spends more, give them reasons for staying in a place, spending money in that place, perhaps returning to that place, you get a higher yield. Think of it like agriculture, a crop, like wheat or rice or any product like that, or milk, getting a higher yield. Also, tourism is like a crop. I regard tourism as almost like a kind of agriculture, like a crop. It's getting a higher yield from your crop, from your inputs. And then, as a result of that, to raise the participation levels of local population, the local communities, and from that, increase income levels, directly and indirectly, through various means. Through direct employment is the obvious one, but also through what we call the supply chain or the value chain. This is really the key benefit of tourism to a region, to a city, a region, or a country. It's what we call the added value benefits. It's not just the direct benefits. Tourism has huge indirect benefits in terms of the supply chain. It stimulates the construction industry, number one. It then helps to stimulate agriculture, food and beverage production, because you have to supply the tourists. Tourism, what tourism does, ladies and gentlemen, it expands demand. It expands demand in a particular region or a city or a country for a whole wide range of goods and services. And it's not just demand, it's what we economists call effective demand, people that are willing and able to pay for goods and services. So perhaps often the indirect benefits outweigh the direct benefits. And don't forget, who is the biggest, often in most countries, who is the biggest beneficiary from tourism? Is it the hoteliers? Is it the travel agents? Is it the people who operate the trains or the buses or the planes? No. In most countries, it's the government is the biggest beneficiary. Let's just have a look at the map. It perhaps explains it better. The three target regions. Uganda has no coastline. It's completely landlocked. But it does have a huge lake. This lake is like an inland sea. It's like an inland ocean. Lake Victoria. It's the second biggest lake in the world. You cannot even see from one side to the other. It has its own islands. It has its own beaches. It has tides. It has its own fishery industry. It is huge. And it is shared between three countries. The top third belongs to Uganda. The bottom two-thirds to Tanzania. And Kenya has a very small slice just here. This is Kenya, or Kenya, whichever you prefer. This is Tanzania. This is South Sudan on the northern border. This is the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Down here is Rwanda. So that's your sort of geographic context in which you find Uganda. So the three areas in the southeast, on the Kenya border, these are our target areas to support our tourism SMEs. In the west, near the Congo border, I was telling Mr. Hamid, fantastic tea production there. There are tea estates in the west of Uganda that just go on as far as the eye can see. It's like oceans. It's like the color of these walls here. Just oceans of rolling tea plantations. Huge things. But actually, after tourism is Uganda's #1 export. They derive about $812 million a year from tourism directly, from international tourism. Secondly comes coffee, about $550 million a year. And then after that is tea. They produce a huge amount of tea and coffee, but you're probably not familiar with it. Maybe it goes into blending or it goes to some other sources. All the tea goes to the Mombasa tea auction. Mombasa is the main port, although it's not in Uganda. Of course, it's in Kenya, on the Indian Ocean. That's the main port for goods going in and out of Uganda, and that's where the tea auctions are. And then finally, our third region is in the far southwest corner of Uganda. This is where you find the mountain gorillas. Has anyone heard about or seen pictures or films or documentaries about the mountain gorillas? No? This is what's unique about Uganda. In fact, only 2 countries in the world. It's not unique because Rwanda has it also. Last year, I worked also for UNWTO as part of the team on the Tourism Master Plan for Uganda. There was a team of about 7 or 8 specialists in different areas. I was the tourism economist. This came as a result of the planning, the physical planner on the Tourism Master Plan for Uganda. What they came up with was 6 tourism development areas. They're not based on administrative regions or provinces like you have here. They're based on tourist attractions. Why would a tourist go to this area or this area? What's of interest? Wildlife, culture, what is there to attract them? Fisheries, sport. So each one of these 6 or 7 tourism TDAs, tourism development areas, has a theme. So that's what these are in the blue boundaries. The red arrows are routes. What we want to encourage and this is again something you can look at here around your provinces, is to encourage people to move around the country to spread the benefits of tourism. We don't want tourism just to be concentrated in the far southwest corner where the mountain gorillas are, because then the rest of the country doesn't benefit. It doesn't create employment up here in the north, in Kidepo, where there's a very interesting national park up there on the South Sudan border. We want to encourage people to go to 2 or 3 of these tourism development areas. So the red arrows are the routes, all based around either Kampala, the capital, or Entebbe, the airport. There's only one international airport in Uganda, on the northern shore of Lake Victoria. You may have heard of the source of the Nile. The source of the Nile, I know there are several countries that claim to have the source of the Nile. Uganda perhaps has the best claim of all. It is just here, in a place called Jinja, 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 source of the Nile. So these routes are so people can get to the main tourism development areas. You can call them tourism destination areas is another way of looking at it. Tourism management areas, they are also described from time to time. It can take quite a long time to get from Entebbe to the southwest tourism development area. Roads are not good. They are improving, yes. Internal flights are available, but they're still limited and still expensive. They will create other international airports, but that's a very expensive and slow process. To get from, say, Entebbe, the international airport, to the southwest tourism development area takes about 8 hours by road. So it's quite a trip. Don't worry about not being able to read what's in here. It just explains the different themes within each of these areas. And this is a strategy which I think Saudi Arabia could adopt also. You know, with your provinces, however you divide up your country from a tourism perspective, give each of them a theme, differentiate the product. It's all about product differentiation. So that someone coming to Saudi Arabia will say, oh, I've been to the east, I've been to here, I've been to there, there's something different in the other province or the other region. Give them more reasons for going to these other regions to help spread the economic and social benefits that tourism can bring. So in order to participate in this program, in order to participate in our program, in this UNDP funded program, there are certain eligibility criteria. First of all, it is for owner-managers. It's for people who are actually entrepreneurs. It's another term for them. I also use the term owner-manager. These are people, hands-on people, who are running their tourism businesses. They're not people who perhaps have a construction business and they've then decided to buy a hotel, put a manager in, and they don't run it themselves. This is for people who are running, usually they've started their own business, often family businesses, and are actually running them. They're not employing other people to run them. So it's entrepreneur-owned and entrepreneur-run. But they have to be existing tourism-related businesses. This is not for new startups. It could be. Another program could be to encourage more new tourism startups in these same areas. But this project is not for that. This is very specifically for existing tourism businesses and tourism-related SMEs. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean hotels or restaurants, providers of food and beverage services or accommodation services. It means that people on the supply side too, other people who supply the tourism industry with goods and services. My definition of a tourism business, if you derive 50% or more directly from sales to tourists, you are in the tourism business. So we take a very broad interpretation of what we mean by a tourism business or a tourism-related business. As we said, it's not for new startups or aspiring people, it's for people already running a tourism business. Now, these can be commercial enterprises, commercial businesses, most of them are, but we also don't exclude the possibility of social enterprises, CBTs, community-based businesses. They are also eligible to participate in the program, and some of them are. The majority, I'd say 80%, 85%, are commercial businesses. The rest are social enterprises, community-owned businesses. There's no criteria, there's no set criteria for minimum level of number of employees, or the minimum turnover, or the minimum capitalization, or assets, or the number of years you've been in business. There's no criteria for that. But geographically, they have to operate within the three areas. It's a very geographically targeted program in those three areas we've just been looking at. So it's inclusive rather than exclusive. We try to involve as many people as we can to raise the participation rate in the tourism sector by the small businesses in those three target regions. But ideally, the people we would really like to encourage to come on our program are growth-orientated local or indigenous entrepreneurs, people who want to grow their businesses. Not everybody wants, you could say most people do want to, most people are not always able to. And we'll discuss why that is the case in a minute. Going back to our panel discussion last night, people were describing, and this is the common way of describing the SME sector in any economy, as the backbone of the economy. I'm sure you've all heard that expression before. SMEs are the backbone of the economy. Well, I question this, because sometimes it's quite a weak backbone. Yes, there are a lot of them in numbers, but often their performance level is not as good as it could be or it should be. And that's what this project is all about. It's all about helping these businesses become more competitive, to raise their performance level, so they employ more people, so they become more profitable, so they deal with more suppliers, so that the local communities benefit in the process directly and indirectly. Typically, I find everywhere in the world that SMEs underperform. They underperform in terms of income generation and employment creation. There are a lot of them, but they're not all doing as well as they could be or as well as they should be. So what are the constraints? What I find is too many businesses are what I call stuck in the survival mode. It's difficult starting a business. Don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, it is difficult starting a business. I don't diminish the difficulties involved, but I think it's more difficult to grow a business. That's when the real entrepreneur comes to the fore in growing a business. And too many SMEs that I see around the world are stuck in this survival mode, unable to grow. They start, they get to a certain level, and they get stuck in survival mode. Then a very high percentage of them will eventually decline and go out of business. You know, they do say that more than 2/3 of all new businesses fail within the first 5 years. And that's a universal figure. So what are these constraints of growth? And I really want you to be thinking about how do we relate this to the Saudi scenario? How do we relate this? There are several reasons why there's a lack of growth. These are just some of them, which I've discovered over the last 20, 30 years. Universal issues. Often there's a lack of a provision of or access to quality business support services. And this is what that young man, how do you say his name? Mr. Salam. Pity he's not here just now, Mr. Salama. That was the question he raised yesterday. He said it's not just about money, it's about other forms of support services, say like mentoring, for example, which is absolutely right. There's often a lack of availability and access to quality provision of business support, business development, business promotion services. The second reason gets back to our very first opening remarks about lack of access to capital. Reluctance on the part of the banks, particularly the commercial banks, to lend to SMEs, particularly the tourism sector, because they perceive that as high risk. Because they're small, they lack internal expertise and specialisms. They might be very good at doing what they do, you know, at an operative sort of level. But they may have very poor financial management skills or very poor strategic planning or marketing skills. They may be very good at producing whatever they produce, pots and pans, for example, but they're not very good at thinking ahead, planning, all of the marketing and these other things. They don't have that internal expertise that a bigger company does to draw upon, a reservoir. And also there's a lack of innovation. This is what I see time and time again. They lack innovation. They don't, 10 minutes? They don't innovate. But don't forget, running a business can be very lonely. It can be a very isolating experience. You know, I've experienced that myself, so I don't underestimate that. But also, they are often unwilling, even if they are able to, they are unwilling. Don't underestimate this. They are unwilling to pay for business support or business development services. Even if they can, they're often unwilling to because they think it should be free. Or if it is free, they don't value it. So you kind of can't win on that one. I think when you're developing or planning any kind of entrepreneurship development program, you need to first of all think, how do entrepreneurs learn? How do entrepreneurs think? What is their mentality? How do they learn? I won't go through this from point by point because we're running short of time. But the point I want to get across to you is they learn informally rather than formally. Entrepreneurs are usually very practical people. They don't like sitting in a classroom doing days and days or weeks of training. That doesn't appeal to them at all. They learn mostly from each other. They learn more from us as people who are supporting business development. We call them intermediaries. They learn more from each other than they do from us. And this is why you have to create these platforms. You have to create the right platforms for this, what we call peer group mentoring, this exchange of ideas, experiences, of opportunities to take place. And you do that through creating what we call networking events. I'm a great believer in that. I try to minimize the time spent in formal training and maximize the time people get together. Getting people together is incredibly powerful. Just getting entrepreneurs together in a room, they will automatically start sharing opportunities, sharing ideas, exchanging business cards, and come and see me, and do you know a supplier for this, or who do you recommend to go to get this information? And at the end of the evening, you have to push, I experienced this time and time again, you have to push them out of the door. Push them out of the door. Once they get together, you can't pull them apart. And it is so powerful, just bringing people together, because running a small business is a very isolating experience. They don't often get together. They don't have the opportunity to get together. So I believe you have to create that opportunity. You have to create that platform. The actual framework of the program, shall we call it the skeleton of the program, is based on something I developed in Australia. It's called the three-pronged approach. It's based on 3 levels, shall we say. 3 prongs, 3 levels. The first level is to undertake, first of all, you have to recruit them. Firstly, if you're going to run a business support, business development program, you have to recruit and select. So you have to have some selection criteria. You have to decide, how am I going to reach them? How am I going to recruit them? Am I going to put adverts in the paper, on the radio? Am I going to do mail-outs? Am I going to use databases provided by the Chamber of Commerce? How am I going to reach them? In Saudi Arabia, if you have a business, any kind of business, is it compulsory to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce, or is it optional? Which one is it? It's compulsory. Okay. So they will have these databases. So maybe you can use their database to reach them, to recruit them, to inform these people, these 100 SMEs, for example, 100 entrepreneurs, that we're running this business development program, inviting them to submit expressions of interest to come on the program. Then we will select them on the basis of the criteria which we have described. After you've selected them, then the next stage is profiling. Every business gets profiled. It's a snapshot. It's a snapshot of the business performance right now. So this gives you the baseline. What are they doing? Who are their suppliers? What is their turnover? How many people are they employing? What is their profitability? It gives you a baseline. This is because at the end of the program, you have to measure the impact. These programs are about making an impact, making a difference, improving their performance. How do you know if you've improved their performance? Let's finish in a minute. I'm getting signals from the back. How do you know you've improved their performance if you don't know what they're doing now? So it's based on that. And then from the profiles, you undertake a diagnostic analysis of each of the business issues. What are their needs in terms of helping them develop, helping them get out of this survival mode into growth mode. We want to move survival people into growth. We want to move failure people into survival and survival people into growth. It's like a step-by-step approach. So that's what we do. On the basis of that, we develop the program after you've done that exercise. But there are many different approaches. It's like when I don't play golf. Does anyone here play golf? I don't. But you've seen people on television, Tiger Woods, playing golf. He doesn't take one golf club out with him, does he? No. He has a whole bag of how many clubs can they have? 10, 12, there is a maximum, I don't know. But it's the same with business development. There's no one club. There are many different approaches. Yes, there is a element of training, formal training, but also there are various other approaches you can adopt. This is the most effective way, outreach support, going out to existing businesses and providing business counseling, mentoring and coaching services. That is the most effective, but it's also the most resource intensive. But it comes back to building these networks, building these business networks. I just finally like to conclude by looking at some implications for planners and policymakers, people who are designing and delivering SME support programs and services. Just go through these quickly because of the constraints of time. You need to set objectives, set targets. We looked at that at the beginning for our Uganda program. We know exactly what we have to achieve at the end of our program. How do you measure these impacts? You measure them against the baseline data which you've collected during the profiling exercise. But there has to be a tangible benefit, a tangible improvement. Otherwise, there's no point to running the program. You must define and determine your resourcing requirements. In other words, the financial resources needed for this program, the technical expertise, the logistics required. What do you need to actually deliver this program effectively to achieve your targets, to achieve the growth targets you've set yourself to help these businesses, in helping these businesses grow? You have to decide who is being targeted, where are they being targeted, what sector or what subsector are they being targeted. You have to determine and work out how you're going to recruit them, how you're going to select them, how are you going to reach them. The SME market is very diverse, it's very fragmented, it's dispersed. It's a very difficult market to reach, and to service. You have to determine how you're going to do this. You have to design your inputs, your delivery mechanisms. Who's going to do it? How are they going to do it? Are you going to do it under the auspices of the Chamber of Commerce? Are you going to do it in partnership with the Commission? Is it going to be a government-run program? Many countries have SME support units, have national networks of SME support units. Usually they're not sector-specific. If a country doesn't have that, then you have to create a program like we've done in Uganda to deliver these services. If you have a network of SME support services, then you do it through that network of support services. Although you may need to do that effectively. You have to just final 2 points quickly. You have to schedule these inputs, especially for existing businesses. And this is the biggest difference between existing and new. You have to minimize the time that existing businesses, existing entrepreneurs spend away from their business. If you're running a support program, you minimize the time they spend away. They won't go to 5 days, 2 weeks, a month's training. You can't take them away from their businesses for that length of time. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, don't mix the two. It's like oil and water. Don't mix new or aspiring entrepreneurs with existing businesses. It just doesn't work. Wow. So I think that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I don't know if we have time for questions. Do we have time? He's cutting me off. He's saying, no way. Thank you, translator. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.